So today I am joined by Alexandra Kremer. Do you prefer Alex?
Alex is great.
Sorry, Alex Kremer. Alex, would you mind starting off by telling us a little bit about yourself, both professionally and also personally, if that's okay?
I have ADHD. I have a wonderful blended family with 4 children, two of which are diagnosed autistic ADHD, and I work for Law as a paralegal on the Education and SEND team, as well as my busy life needed to add extra in. I'm also a governor for a local mainstream primary, which is just opening an SRP, so it's all
Oh,
go.
amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
why have one job when you can have 27?
exactly. My husband's not very happy, but I love it.
And when you talk about the fact that you work at Law,
Yeah.
what sort of stuff are you doing there?
Everything on the SEND side predominantly. So as a team, we deal with education as a whole, but my personal passion is SEND. So it's anything from the EHP assessments all through SEND tribunals, supporting parents with pre-action letters to either help them get the provisions listed in their plan or help them get an education at all. It's a really sad state of affairs in how busy it's. I mean, in the time that I've been with Tees for 3 years, and in that time, it's gone from having hearings within 6 months to over a year away.
Yeah.
It's a big change, and there is a lot of people needing help.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, because the system is not the easiest to navigate as a parent.
a few years ago, it was much easier. I mean, especially in the SEND tribunal, to do it yourself. It's theoretically set up that parents can represent themselves.
Yeah,
But I think the way the world has kind of moved and the way that the local authorities are now really kind of sticking to their guns and not backing down even in the face of evidence, it is becoming more and more apparent that you need either expert input or some sort of form of advocacy. It's much trickier these days for sure. And I think a huge bit of it is that there is no consequences to the local authority. They can currently break the law and there are no real comebacks on that.
STEM system has been chronically underfunded and under-resourced for many, many, many years.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just getting worse. And I think, what's interesting now is obviously the talk has come to the forefront, but it's kind of focusing almost on the wrong areas. It's not the AHCPs that are necessarily the problem. It's the funding. It's the how can we support, how can we create school places, how can we create special school places, how can we support the teachers, this new 200 million. That's not enough in the grand scheme of things to
Yeah.
even fix what's happened up till now, let alone give them the skills and the progression and the training they need to support families going forward.
Obviously, you work in education and SEND law, but
Mhm.
how do you think your personal experiences, as well as sort of your professional experiences, have influenced kind of the way that you show up professionally for families?
I mean, for me, this isn't just a job, it's a passion. And, we were talking earlier about why we do things. And that is it. For me, I love this, but I love it because I am doing something that is supporting other families that are just like mine.
Yeah.
And so I get it. And I think that's the one thing that I have, I do get a lot of referrals directly to me, and I'm a paralegal, I'm not a solicitor. And I think the really wonderful thing about that is it just shows that people do want to know that you get what they're going through. And I think, you probably find the same. It's like when you're a therapist, or you need a therapist, you want someone who gets what you've been through.
I think it's especially important, I know for myself and also for, for families that they feel like the person that they're working with does get it. Because I think
Yeah.
there was so much sort of misunderstanding out there, sort of in the general sort of population about what it is that families go through, whether it be it's easy to navigate the system or, your child, doesn't really have any issues. Actually, the problem is that you're just not strict enough or, just general stuff all of the time, and to finally feel like, oh, the person I'm working with, like they get the severity of this and they also understand like the stress and what I'm going
Absolutely.
through and what I'm having to deal with day in, day out.
I mean, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head for me because I used to work as a birth and parenting specialist before I entered this area.
Well, I was going
And
to
for
ask you about
me,
how you came into this area, so we can go there in a moment.
the thing that always really got me was around kind of, behavior and people not understanding that behavior is communication. Like, forget about having special needs. Behavior is communication, full stop. But then when you put that in with a child or even an adult with special needs, it's telling you something. And to think that you can have these kind of traditional parenting kind of paradigms and structure and consequences, it just doesn't work in the same way for neurodiverse children. They don't get that, this consequence means that. Whereas,
If you've
a
got a
more
snack
neurotypical child might.
orientated brain and you've got somebody telling you that actually if they don't do their homework, they lose their TV, they can't learn from that because what's the TV got to do with their homework, as an
Absolutely.
example?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. And I think, that's one of the things I would love just the general population to know when they're like, oh, just take away their iPad, or oh, just ground them, just do this, just do that. It doesn't work. We've been there, we've done that. And, I've fallen out with my own family over the same thing previously. And it's only when they've actually then come and stayed with us for an extended period of time that, okay, I can see that, you have tried those things in the past. I can also see how they don't work. And actually what you do does. And it's really interesting because while those relationships are fractures for a time, they now get it because they've experienced it. And I think if you haven't experienced it, it's very, very hard to understand.
Yeah, and there can be so much judgment. I mean, I definitely know people have called me sort of like too soft with my kids, and does it not bother me that sometimes they don't say please and thank you, or just this really traditional stuff. And I'm just like, their nervous system is like trying to survive in a world that is like too loud, too fast, that feels really difficult. Yeah, I don't really care that in that moment, if they're not regulated, they don't say please or thank you. Like, my job as their parent is to actually teach them to regulate their nervous systems, to feel safe. And I know that when they can, my children do amazingly. Children do well when they can.
And that's across the board. Your child doesn't need to have some or any needs to go, actually, we just want our kids to be safe and happy and grow. And so much of that is learned through modelling as well. And it's not.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. I was sat, sorry, going on such an ADHD tangent here. I was sat at gymnastics with my daughter the other day. And of course, being an ADHDer myself, I'm trying to get on with some work, but there is a parent behind me with her child, and I just cannot tune it out. And I sat there for 5, 10 minutes, and I could find myself like getting angrier and angrier as she was saying, like, you're disgusting, come sit down, get your homework done, you're so bad, you're so naughty. Oh my gosh, okay, is that it? Am I going to take football away this weekend? You've already lost it on Saturday. And I was just sat there and I was just like, oh my gosh, if I actually don't move, one, I'm not going to get any work done, but two, I'm going to say something, because I just can't. And I literally had to get up and move because I just found myself getting so furious. And like, think to myself, does she not realise that if those things worked, she wouldn't be having this issue in the first place?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
just this sort of like lens we get given, the whole way through, about children are just fundamentally naughty. They are born just to give you a hard time. That just like this really negative kind of outlook on what kids are. To
Just
me.
fascinated because, you've sat there, you've had those feelings, but you haven't gone, oh, I don't agree with it to that parent. But apparently, as a SEND parent, it's a bit of a free-for-all and anyone's allowed to comment on how you
Yes,
do it
that is
regardless of
also
feelings.
very true. It's like I would never
Fascinating.
dream of going up to a stranger and saying something, but
Yeah.
actually everyone's got an opinion on your children and what you should do when it's clear that they have additional needs. What was the moment that led you into law then?
So lockdown was an interesting time in our lives. My son at the time, I didn't know that he had special needs. He's my oldest. I didn't know any different. I parented him, in this kind of, gentle, respectful way where it was all about understanding the need and what was going on rather than the consequence. So I didn't have the difficulties that then kind of started to come up as he got a bit older. But lockdown really highlighted that there was something more going on. And being forced to sit in front of a computer screen at 5, 6 years old to do online learning did not work.
Oh, yes, I do.
And we really, really struggled. And I really struggled. And I was working as a parenting specialist at the time. And I'm going, if I can't deal with my own child, how can I help and support other people? And we got him diagnosed, and I realised that I knew absolutely nothing about the system and how to get through it, what he needed, how to work with the school, any of it. So I went and did a SEND law course, and armoured myself with all of the knowledge you could. And in true kind of, my neurodiverse brain went, I have to learn everything and I have to learn it all right now. And that's what I did. And I sent the local authority pre-action correspondence around the EHCP, which is a whole long story. They ignored me because I did not have the legal paper, the headed paper for it to go on. And so I ended up hiring a solicitor at Dees and had a long conversation with her that first time. And she turned around and said, gosh, you know quite a bit, don't you? And I'm like, well, this is what I've been doing. You're on a job. And that was literally
Brilliant.
how I came to work at Dees and in SEND law. And it's been amazing. It's absolutely love it.
So, like, navigating the SEND system can take quite a toll on people's mental health. From your own experiences, what are the realities that kind of many people are facing, or, if you don't mind talking personally as well?
Yeah, I think it has such a negative effect just in across the board in general, which affects your relationships, not just with your immediate family, but with everyone around you in the amount of time and, you know, cognitive input and emotional input that you're putting into this child, and not only just your child, but the battle that you're then having with the school or the local authority or wherever it might be, in getting that support, it's exhausting. And, you know, it causes ruptures at home, and you might butt heads on the way that you deal with things, or, you know, you have this lack of sleep, or you don't go out because you can't go out anymore. Who do you leave your child with when no one else can handle them? So you start to lose your friendships, and you start to lose that kind of adult side of yourself. And it's such a kind of a ripple effect of, it's not just about that child and that child that's struggling, it then affects the parents, it then affects the parents' like, you know, family and the wider circle. And it's really, really hard. And I think a lot of people don't understand, again, if they're not in it, the severity of it or of what it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you've got a child who perhaps needs specialist and is still in mainstream, and you're still having to send them into mainstream, or they are refusing and you can't physically get them in, or you've got a child who is attending all day but masking, their needs aren't being met, so they come home totally dysregulated, experiencing restraint collapse, you know, can't leave the house over the weekend, their mental health starts going downhill, your mental health starts going downhill. And the system isn't a quick thing. It's not like you can ring somebody up and say, oh, there's a problem here, can we get this sorted? And then like the next day, you know, this goes on for years, you know, and many STEM parents aren't even aware how the system works, what they need to do. You know, they get lied to, they get told their children don't need EHCPs because the schools don't want to do another bit of paperwork. Or, you know, the local authority, you know, takes it to panel for a specialist school and people are told no. Or, you know, like, even I think back actually to my first child, and obviously I was young when I had my first child, and it took me 3 attempts to get them an EHCP. And the reason it took that long was because I didn't understand the system. I didn't know what I was doing. I was really young. I wasn't educated at the time in terms of how this all worked. I didn't have other people going through it at the same time that I could lean on. I very much was the first person out of all of my group to have a child who was diagnosed. I was in my 20s, and the local authority said to me, they don't qualify for an assessment. And I went, oh, okay. And I went away for a couple of years. Things carried on. Then I went back again, same thing. And then eventually, when I found a really supportive Senko, he was like, this is insane. How have they got this far through the school system and then had to come out of school because they couldn't cope anymore? And you don't have an EHCP is absolutely insane. But even then I didn't understand, because then when I got the EHCP, it wasn't worth the paper it was written on.
Yeah.
And I didn't even understand that part.
And it's such a common story. And the thing is the people that, you know, we are turning to don't always know the information themselves. You know, I did an online kind of governance course the other day on Send, and I just was looking at it and I thought, well, that's not quite true. I'm not sure that's quite lawful on some of the bits of information. I thought, and that's it, right? So Senkos don't get given the training that honestly they require, and they are given a local authority bod who they're meant to use and rely on for all that information, who often doesn't give them the right information. And so they're then passing on, and it's just like this whole train of misinformation that gets passed down, and it creates such negativity. And so often it's actually not the school's fault or not the Senko's fault or any of that. It's just they don't have the information either. And so where do you go if you don't?
It's horrendous for families. It's horrendous for the kids. Like the kids who are having to keep going into a provision, you know, the impact on their mental health,
Absolutely.
you know, the impact on everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're allowed to answer this. What are some of the sort of like normal things you see in terms of people's mental health?
Huge range. Mental health, a huge range. And like in people's mental health, it's like a lot of it is even just PTSD is huge.
Yeah.
Like I've seen so many parents who are suffering from PTSD. And again, a lot of it's because they just don't have the help, or parents that are actually in a way subjected to domestic violence by their own children because there isn't the social care and the educational support and everything by the HCPs and the local authority that should be in place. You know, you've got parents that are depressed, you've got parents that are suicidal, you know, and I've been there. I remember fully, you know, good few years ago now, banging on the office door at the school going, I don't know what to do, my child is suicidal. It makes me feel like that too. And it's like, where do you go? And they go, well, you know, we're quite busy today.
Yeah.
And we've got 6 other people who need EHCP. So, you know, you're kind of at the bottom of the list that we're going to have to deal with. And you know what, like I'm lucky. I have a great supportive family and network, etc. But there are so many people that don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there aren't enough places to turn to.
Yeah, I mean, I count myself as a privileged person in terms of access to education, a home, finance, a loving husband, a support system, friendships. Like, so many people are navigating this, you know, with far fewer resources. And, you know, I actually remember a moment where I think it was my youngest who had, I won't say she had the most difficult time, but it certainly went on for the longest. And I was seriously concerned about her mental health. I mean, when you have your 5-year-old turning around to you and telling you that they want to be dead, you know,
Exactly.
it's incredibly distressing. And I remember calling the local authority and basically just saying, what is going on? You haven't given me a decision around whether you're going to assess or not. And saying, do you not understand? My child literally doesn't want to be here anymore. And the woman turning around to me and saying, yes, her and hundreds of others.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God. Like,
and that's the reality of it, is there is so many. So either they're a kind of, you know, a diagnosis on a piece of paper rather than a real person, or they're just a number in a system. And because there's been so many,
yeah.
it kind of dilutes the like importance and the severity of what is going on in that moment for that child or that family.
Yeah, thank you for naming the stuff around trauma, because I think a lot of parents are traumatized, yet
Absolutely.
people don't actually kind of say that, and then they kind of think, oh, there's something really wrong with me. Why am I struggling so much?
Yeah.
Without understanding actually what people are going through. Professionally, what is sort of your biggest bugbear?
I've got so many, a whole list. I think one is kind of what we've touched on previously, which is the misinformation. That to me is huge, because the information is there, parents can be supported, and I don't think that the media necessarily does any favours. I don't think that other parents necessarily do it any favours.
Oh,
You know,
what
that
you mean like when people make comments about people not really being disabled because they're wearing those silly earmuffs?
just like that,
Right.
or having, you know, seeing the news articles about this golden EHEP is going to get you the place at that really nice posh private school down the road that you want funded, and just having such a lack of understanding of how hard it actually is to even get that. And you have this whole process to go through. And it's not as simple as going, oh yeah, my child, you know, is a bit dyslexic or got a few needs here or there, they suffer from anxiety. Oh, I want a posh school. It doesn't work like that. And I think it often gets conveyed like that. And that I find really, really frustrating. I find it really frustrating around the lack of support that there is. And again, touched on everything that we've said, in that you have a child with mental health issues, and because they're diagnosed as autistic, then they then have to go down this certain path, and they can't go down the, you know, the normal counselling route. It has to be potentially a different counselling route depending on which local authority you're in.
Did you actually find a counselling route?
No,
Oh, because I was going
no.
to say, because one of mine got ping-ponged between services because nobody wanted them because they were autistic.
It was very similar to that, and in the end, I mean, with one of mine, actually, we both have had some form of support, but one was, okay, we'll give you this parenting course, and that will help you to
The
help
one that
them.
works really
And
well
I'm
for
sat there going,
neurodivergent kids.
this is literally what I teach. It's not very helpful for me right now, but you have to go through all of the courses to get to a point where they're going to look at actually offering you much more. And, you know, some local authorities are much better than others. You know, we need to be doing more as a country, I think, to be investing in these experts and these professionals, whether that's independent or NHS, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But we need more of them. It's incredibly difficult to become an EP. It's not an open, easy training route.
Oh, yes. I mean, I know when they were trying to find an EP for one of mine, it was like the wait was just ridiculous, you know, and we're privileged in the fact that we ended up doing a huge proportion of it self-funded, which I was going to ask you, an average fight for a family, how much might it cost them?
I mean, it really depends on where they are in the process. If you're looking at a
Worst case,
child,
best case, if they are doing it without representation, which, as you said, has become much harder to do now.
I mean, if you're doing it without representation, theoretically, you should be able to do it without it costing anything. In that, the local authority, if you ask them to reassess child's needs, should really reassess the child's needs.
Okay, but
You should have
what
evidence.
actually happens?
What actually happens is
Yeah.
very often that doesn't happen. And parents will need to instruct experts to get the evidence. And even then, instead of that evidence being looked at as this is a professional in their own right, doesn't matter who they work for, even then it gets taken down the line to tribunal. And experts aren't cheap. You know, you can be looking at £1,000 to £3,000 for an assessment per expert for an assessment and report.
So worst case, best case?
I mean, look, I would say best case, if you're instructing experts alone and you maybe only need an EP, you'd be looking at £3,000 to £5,000 for the entire thing, doing it all yourself. I think that if you're in a worst case scenario and you're kind of going through the whole process, you're looking at, you know, a slightly more complex situation, you could easily spend in excess of £20,000, easily.
Yeah.
And the average appeal, you know, we would quote the average appeal for BFNI is around £12,000 plus that. And even then, whilst we will always look to settle, and that for me, going back to an earlier question, as a SEND parent, we will always look to settle. No one wants to get it all the way to tribunal.
Yeah.
But very often you're still spending a hell of a lot of money, and
That's
you need to be
another
able to come up.
huge onus on parents that's going to put their mental health at risk because people are
Absolutely.
working over and above. And how many appeals are overturned at tribunal in favour of the parents? Holding
I
in mind
mean,
that parents are spending maybe
it's really tricky to
£20,000.
break down the data completely. So the way that they record it, it's, if you've won part of it, then you have won it. But really, it's, I can't remember the exact figure, like 98.8% or something off the top of my head, one in the parent's favour. And it shouldn't, just highlights the unlawfulness that goes on.
Do they get their money back?
No. There is, and this is, again, there is no consequences on the local authorities, no consequences for them breaking the law, and there is no consequences for dragging a parent through all of this. There's no right, there's no cost right at the end of it. It's incredibly difficult to get costs at the end of tribunal. I personally haven't seen it so far.
What misconceptions about neurodivergence or mental health do you wish more people understood, whether it be professionals, schools, decision makers, people who think silly earmuffs are worn just for the fun of it, maybe?
I think there are a few things. One of the things that I struggle with a lot at the moment is because obviously ADHD is really in the news a lot at the moment, and there is a lot around, but it's, you've got all of these amazing superpowers. And to an extent, that's true, right? I know that personally, my ADHD brain can go 3 million steps ahead before most other people's, and I'm there and I've got it and I've got the answer. But that also doesn't take into account the struggles and the impact that it's had on me and my life in not being able to hold down jobs, in not being able to keep friends, they're out of sight, out of mind. It's, all of these things, forgetting to pick your child up from school, which, hold my hands up, has happened. Because I get such focus into what I'm doing that I'm then like, oh, okay, yeah, my alarm's gone off, I'll leave in a minute. And the next thing I know, time blindness is an hour later.
Yeah.
There is, I think that is a really tricky thing. I think, there is a lot more again around, just so much, the system is broken. I think there's just so much more that can be done. I think there's so many more reasonable adjustments that can be done. Yeah.
I personally hate the superpowers narrative because it's like, I just find it really invalidating of people's struggles. And it's also something like having or being ADHD or being autistic is such a bad thing that we need to like bigger up and make you feel good about stuff. So we couldn't possibly believe that you're actually okay with being ADHD or autistic. And also, not everyone does have superpowers. Some of us have strengths. Some of us have areas we struggle. Some of us it's mixed.
And I think this is just it. I look at it as in, even without having children that have needs, right? You have one child, and you think, oh, okay, I know this child, I know how they work. And then you have a second one, and you look at them and go, oh, okay, they're going to be just like that. And then you look at them, and they're like, oh my God, they are not like my first child.
My goodness, no,
And
all of mine are so different.
And it's the same with SEND, because, both my children are autistic ADHD. They present very, very differently. Their superpowers and their needs differ massively. And we are all different. And I think that really, really needs to stop. And the other thing that I really struggle with is this whole diagnosis, over-diagnosis issue.
Oh.
And, you couldn't get diagnosed as an adult until, I think it was 2008, don't quote me on that. But before that, there also wasn't a huge amount for the last 30, 40, 50 years of information to get diagnosed as a child, especially as a woman, as a girl. And, you can present and you can go and you're then on this waiting list that is 3 years long in the NHS to be diagnosed. And you get to a point where things are so bad, and this could be a child or an adult, right? And you go, okay, something needs to happen because no one's going to take me seriously without my diagnosis because they think I'm just that parent, or, it's just the child is naughty. So you go get an independent diagnosis. And then either the local authority or the GP or whoever it might be goes, sorry, you got that privately.
Yeah.
Sorry, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. And,
God forbid you need medication. Oh, we don't do shared care agreements.
Oh, don't, honestly. I mean, it just blows my mind. I was on medication for quite a while. I went from a reputable, medical team, went to my GP, no, sorry, you need to go through registries. And I'm like, hang on a minute. And you go and get re-diagnosed all over again, just to prove that you have the same thing, that these people work both for the NHS and both independently. It doesn't make sense. And talk about wasting resources, this money needs to be funneled elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I get it that they need to be careful because there are possibly people out there doing online 2-minute assessments, because ADHD assessments could be quite money making for some people potentially. But again, we're going from a ethos of most people are bad and we can't trust them, versus, I don't think most humans are like that. And actually, maybe there are just things they can put in place to make sure that assessments are done in a thorough way and private
Yeah.
assessments can still be used
This
versus
is it.
let's just waste loads of money here and get everyone to sit back through the list, get re-diagnosed. Like, it's crazy.
But it feeds into the whole process, full stop. And, going back to EHCPs and or appeals, you're getting expert evidence. Why is it that a speech and language therapist who, let's say, has previously worked for the NHS but now works for themselves,
Yeah.
their evidence does not count, despite the fact that they're part of a body and they are qualified, they've got 20 years experience, versus an NHS speech and language therapist who maybe has 3 or 4 years experience and has only worked for the NHS? Why does their evidence not count?
Because
Why is that not taken into
I think the
consideration?
assumption is that because they're being paid privately, that the parents can get them to say or do whatever they like. Because I mean, every parent gives birth and thinks, you know what, the thing I really want to do is spend years fighting to get my child into a specialist school that they don't really need. I just thought it'd be nice.
We talk a lot about the negatives, though. There are so many positives, and I've seen this recently in that my youngest has needs movement breaks, etc., and he's got a kind of personalised OT plan, and he really struggles to appear different. And so the school went, we should make a whole class movement break, see what happens. And they came back to me a few weeks later and they went, this has been game changing. They went, every single child in that class is being able to sit down better, they're being able to focus better. And they went, we're going to look at doing this throughout the school. And I'm like, and that's it, right? And that's where inclusion works.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't always work for everyone, but there are so many positives. And I think we keep focusing on all of these negatives, but actually when done right, there are schools that are doing it right. There are
Oh my gosh,
that are doing it right. There are local authority officers that are actually in support of the parents.
So we were just talking earlier when I said to you, I'm almost a little bit too scared to believe it, but I've just come across somebody who actually, I emailed her and she called me the same day and told me she was here to help and support my child. And I genuinely think she really cares. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that because there are people. They are few and far between, but actually they are very much, appreciated and noted. And that teacher that does go the extra mile, yeah. And actually, I have to say, the school that my daughter's in now, yes, it's a specialist school, but they are phenomenal. They are absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, just
good. It makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. And I think, again, it's not about hating on the local authority, because as much as I spend every day against the local authority, there are a lot of the people there do want to help, and they take these jobs. And in all honesty, if I was to go and be a tribunal officer or a local authority EHP officer, I would earn more doing that than I do in my current role, which is ridiculous. So these people are getting paid really good money, and they actually want to support, and then they go in and they realise that policy, etc., whatever, and it doesn't align with how they want to help, and they leave or they get pushed out. And there's this huge churn, and that churn is there for a reason. Every single parent I talk to, nearly every parent, is like, I've had 3 or 4 local authority officers. I'm like, this is why.
Just in the course of our last tribunal, we had 3 different tribunal officers. Final thing, if you had to leave a message for one parent, person, child, what would it be?
I think it would probably just be that there is hope. I think there is a lot of negativity right now, and I think there's a lot of negativity in the news. I think there's a lot of, pushback in dealing with schools and local authorities and things. But I think there really is hope, and I think people do care, and it's about trying to find those people around you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Even if you don't have the money, and I feel like I've scared people by going, oh, you might have to pay 10, 20,000 pounds for a bill. Even if you don't,
people who do it themselves.
There are people who do it. I mean, again, I did it for myself before I came in here, and I run an independent special school. But there are so many parents that do that. But there are also so many amazing charities out there that support it.
Are you able to mention a couple just for anybody?
Yeah, I mean, we work really closely with SOS Sen. They do online helplines and drop-in advice centres around kind of like the south and southeast. But there are many, many more like that. IPSEA is an absolutely brilliant
website, IPSEA.
They are fabulous, and they do brilliant training for parents, for Senkos, for local authorities. They have resources. There is a lot out there, and you can arm yourself.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, thank you so much.
Welcome.
You want to come on the podcast, do you, Ted?
Hello, is this the puppy from before?
No, that was a different puppy, because a bit like why have one dog when you can have 7? I mean, why have 1 or 2 things living in your house when you can have 10?
Yeah, why not?
So,
add to the chaos.
On that note, I'll stop recording. Hang on.